Welcome to the Fantasy Grimoire podcast, Shari. It is so great to have you with us.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to come on.
Well, I want to get started immediately with your debut series, The Divided Kingdom. It's your debut. You have book
Yes.
1 and book 2 out, but you're
Mhm.
also working on book 3.
Yes.
What can you tell us about this series and who is your ideal reader?
I started writing the series about 14 years ago. And it was before I had my daughter. And so I had definitely more time to commit to writing. So I wrote the whole thing, I would say, in about 6 months. First draft, I mean, definitely not polished draft. Um, it started, I believe it's chapter 23. It just started as an idea that was festering in my brain, and I just couldn't get it out of my head. And so I finally wrote out that scene, and then the rest of the story built from there. And that now is chapter 23 in the first book. After I finished the first book, I jumped right into the second book and I wrote probably the first 10 chapters, I would say. And then life kind of took over. Eventually, around 2018 was when I decided, you know what, I think I want to come back to this and do something with this. I'd had friends and family read it, which of course you can say, well, they're going to be nice, but everyone did seem to really enjoy it. So I went back to it. I loved the story. I wanted to continue it. So I went through with independently publishing Mask. And then the task of writing the sequel came, and I thought, well, I already have 10 chapters. This won't be too bad. But, at this time I also had a young child and and I had changed because it had been about, I don't know, 8 or 9 years. So the story for me needed to mature in some ways. Anyway, so it took a lot longer than I thought it would take to write the second book, but I was really proud of it because I felt like I was having to merge these two different sides of me, the person who wrote Mass versus the person who was writing Forsaken, but still make it fit within the story I was telling, because it's not my story. Of course, it's Adeline and Drake's. So that was the difficulty with writing those books, but I'm very proud of them. The third book will be the last one, and it's heavily centered on the romantic aspect between Adeline and Drake. It's friends to lovers, but there's so much more to it. Drake has no memories of anything past the day he falls into the river in Fagreen, covered in blood. Before that, it's just completely wiped blank, and he has no idea why. So it's this conflict of him discovering who he really is and finding his past, and then Adeline wanting him to. She knows a little bit more that she's afraid to share because she's afraid that these things could ultimately separate them. And that's kind of her selfish aspect to her, that she doesn't want to risk losing him. So there's that struggle. And then it's amidst these two kingdoms have this deep history and they're heading towards a war.
So, what I'm hearing is romance readers are going to dive straight into this series. And if you like a little bit of magic sprinkled in between, then this is definitely the type of series for you.
Yes, and I would want readers to know book 1 doesn't have as much because it takes place in Silveria, and that's the kingdom that's blocked off from all of the magic and mythical creatures and everything. But book 2, Forsaken, takes place in Incarnadine, and that is the kingdom that has all of the magic, and the Hellions is what I call them in the book.
I almost want to say in the fantasy genre overall, world building comes with its own challenges because, to simplify, we make up quite a bit.
Yes, we do.
A big thing that we learn is that before we can actually write our story, we have to understand the world that we're writing in.
Yes.
And I know when you start bridging the more romantic fantasy, epic, anything in that category versus I write urban, which is a lot more simple in
Yeah.
my mind. I almost want to feel that quite a bit of a learning curve comes with that world building. And I'm curious to hear, what are some of your experiences with world building? What are some of your tips and tricks, or how did you approach it for your series?
World building was difficult. I will admit, I knew I wanted, because I have such a romance with medieval times. It's just something I've always gravitated towards since childhood. So when I was writing this story, I knew I wanted a medieval fantasy type of setting. So just looking up different things I wanted to keep some realism from medieval times and use some of the terminology. But then I also knew, because it was fantasy, there were some things that I could get away with, tweaking, but still keeping it grounded in reality was important to me. That if this was a real place, it made sense that this could happen and why. So everything I implemented, I tried to think, okay, well, what would be the fallout of actually having something like this? How would people actually react to something like this? Because it's really important to me that it feels real, even though it's fantasy. One thing that I did is I would kind of start small. So if you think, I would picture Adeline at the Great Tree. And I would almost picture it like an aerial view, like you're zooming out and seeing the landscape in a broader way. And that's when I would see the fog. And that's when I would imagine what's going on behind the fog and where is the other kingdom, and trying to kind of map it out in my mind. And I drew some maps, but I'm not an artist. But I did draw maps for myself. I drew some of the creatures for myself. I have a lot of books on mythology and different folklore that I took some inspiration from. Some of the Hellions are pulled from actual mythology and stuff like that. And then some I just created on my own that just came to me and I, sketched out and stuff like that. Mostly, though, I would say I focused on writing the story first. And as things came in, I had them come in. And then as I went back through, I thought, okay, I need to flesh this out more. So where did this come from? What is the backstory with this? And an example of that too would be in the second book, I didn't plan on having a cult-like group, which it was barely mentioned. It'll be highlighted more in the third book, but their presence was shown in the second book. But it came about as I was thinking about this magic, and now they're in this kingdom where there's these powers and these magical abilities. So of course, regular humans would want that, and they'd want to try to find a way to have a piece of it. And if starting to form a cult like group that worships this magical being that they think can actually bestow these powers to them if they do favors for them, it made sense to me that that would exist. So it wasn't something that I planned on having, but as I was writing and I was looking at this magic and I thought, okay, so what else could be going on? Then those kind of things came about. And so then I inserted them into the story. And then lastly, I would say Pinterest boards are always helpful.
I'm just going to take a wild guess here.
Mhm.
You're a little bit of a plotter slash pantser hybrid as well.
Yes,
Okay, so I am.
100%. 100%. Because I will build an outline and then I deviate so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's funny that you mentioned the cult because I've got one too. But they're my modern day witch hunters, and I never planned for them. Okay, it was literally a side character in book one. That was it. Like that was the character arc done. And then as I did my rough outline for book two, and
Mhm.
an outline. It's like a sentence just so I know where I'm starting.
Exactly.
And then I'm like, okay, now I have my villain, but my villain needs someone to work with it. I'm
Yeah.
like, what about this crazy ass bitch from book one? And
Yeah.
oh God, I love writing the really fucked up characters that are
They're
just,
so much fun.
oh God, I love psycho characters are my favorite thing in the world to write. So anyway, um, like I just started writing and writing and writing. And then like this whole arc, which I had never even planned for, like book two has ended in a way that I'm just like, what the fuck happened?
Yeah.
Because
She
like,
takes over.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Yeah. Yeah.
just as I was listening to you explain that, I was like, yeah, I'm sensing a lot of similarities between
Hmm.
us here. And I want to ask, so I know that I personally am a good storyteller,
Hmm.
but and I think I've got a very unique take on, I almost want to say commonly loved stories.
Yeah.
Okay. But I know my writing skills always need work. So I'm always looking for opportunities to level up on that. And I wanted to know which one are you and what are some of the things you do to hone your.
Ooh, that's a hard one. I'd like to think I'm balanced, but if I'm being really realistic with myself, I do think the writing aspect comes a bit easier for me. I can sit down and I also write poetry, and so that stuff will just kind of pour out. I don't really have to put much effort or thought into it. The emotional aspects of the book are pretty easy for me to write. The dialogue, all of that just kind of flows very effortlessly. And then I think when it comes to, okay, so where are we going now? I know the highlights, but getting the path there, I think I have to put in a little more legwork into, I guess you would say. And even though, I mean, the story concepts do come, I have to have a journal on me at all times or my phone with a bunch of notes because I get random ideas at random times for all sorts of things. I think all of us writers know what that's like. And it's like, ooh, there could be a story here. So, but I would say that because I think honestly the hardest part for me was the world building. So then I would say that leans into that the writing part's a little easier than the storytelling part, I would say, all in all. As far as what I do to improve, I would say reading just a lot. And a lot of books, even if it's one that I don't feel like I'm loving, I try to think about why. You know, what is it about this for me that I'm not liking and why? What do I think is the problem with it? And that's even a learning experience because then it's like, okay, I want to make sure I don't do that because as a reader, I didn't like that. And then reading one of my favorite authors is V.E. Schwab. I just think the way she combines the beauty of her writing with her storytelling is just near perfection in my opinion. I just love it. And then doing writing sprints. I remember I read a blog by Laini Taylor and she talked about how she just sits down and sometimes she just writes with no plan in mind. And she just says, I'm just going to write and whatever comes out, comes out. And I think that's always fun to do because you can surprise yourself with what starts to flow. And so I think those help too. But just trying to be consistent with writing. I know when I take a long break due to just life getting in the way and I start writing again, I feel like I have training wheels on.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I forgot.
So
I can't do it anymore. It's gone.
I can't remember how I came across this in my feed, but I don't know if you've heard of the author Helen Schroyer. I think that's how you say her name. She wrote the Blood and Steel fantasy series. I haven't read that yet, but she also wrote two self-help books for indie authors. I'm reading the first one, How to Launch a Successful Series, but she's also written How to Write a Successful Series. So that's next up on my
Yeah.
list. Let me tell you, this woman is incredible. Okay. I very rarely deviate from a fantasy book because I'm like, who wants to read like real life stuff? Blah, boring. But she has such a wonderful way of like explaining it and it doesn't feel like a chore. She's already suggested a few things in her one book where I'm like, well, shit, that makes sense. Why haven't I been doing that? And it's been such a wonderful learning experience for me.
Absolutely.
But also, you joke about each author needs to, have a notebook or their phone with them. My husband and I, we did a long weekend in Prague last weekend, and we are on the Plague Doctor tour. So, for listeners that don't know, Prague is obviously a very, very old city,
Mm-hmm.
and back in, don't quote me on the exact year, but like the 1400s, like back in the day, they had a plague outbreak. And funny enough, it's a plague that still exists to this day. They told us on the tour that someone in Arizona just died of this plague like last week.
You're like, what is happening?
I'm like, I thought maybe
I think I
someone.
remember reading about that actually. Yeah.
So that was like wild to me. But anyway, as the tour guide is taking us through this plague doctor tour, I'm like, oh, he just solved my one plot issue. And I was like furiously making notes on my phone. And it's so funny because my husband doesn't even bat an eyelid anymore. He's so used to this. Yeah, it's just like, yeah, that about tracks with what I expect from her. It was the funniest thing in the world. One of the reasons why we moved to Amsterdam was we wanted to travel because, sure, South Africa is big, Africa even bigger, but it felt like we were stuck in this tiny little town.
Mm-hmm.
And if you didn't, and I'm originally from Cape Town, by the way, the version of Cape Town that you see on Reels
Yeah.
is the poorest version. Okay, that's not the real life version. Again, like with anything here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gets it.
And my husband and I, we wanted more. We wanted more exposure. So like something absolutely silly, I'll say now. I still, after living here for 5 years, cannot differentiate between Ukrainian, the language I'm talking about,
Mm-hmm.
Russian, Belarusian, um, Czech, I think they call it Czechia. So like the whole Eastern European bloc, because we didn't get exposed to much
Yeah.
of that South Africa. So now the language sounds completely unfamiliar to me. And I don't know what's going on. I'd heard Spanish in the movies, obviously, but you don't get that much Spanish down in South Africa. Like
Yeah, I can
it's not
imagine
new.
that. Mm-hmm.
So that was a big thing for us. So
Mm-hmm.
now when we moved over, we would travel, I would say, quite a bit every year, and we couldn't travel this year. The doctors say, of course you can, like
Yeah.
you can travel. But when your treatments are so close to each other and then you spend such a big portion
Mhm.
of time feeling like shit,
Yeah.
like, I'm not going to throw money down the drain.
Yeah. To go lay in the room. Yeah.
Exactly. And
Mhm.
especially when you're on chemo,
Mhm.
your skin gets so sensitive in the sun. I mean, what am I going to do? So now it was Wednesday. I was 6 weeks post-op. And there was a small little window we had now because I start with radiation next week.
Yeah.
And we were like, fuck it. Like,
Let's go.
let's just go.
Yeah.
Let's go wild. And I'm telling you, I felt like an absolutely normal person. Like, there was, like, obviously, cancer does come up. Okay. Like, it does. It's always going to come up. It's part of my life now. Fine. Okay. But I could drink beer. And yes, some cancer people that have had cancer do not drink. For me personally, and I actually spoke to my oncologist about
Mhm.
this, we're not saying go have a bottle of tequila every night.
Yes.
Okay. A big part of treatment here in the Netherlands is quality of life. So it's like you're in Prague, beer capital, have a cocktail.
Enjoy. Yeah.
Like,
Enjoy your life.
exactly.
Mhm. Like
Um, da, da, da.
all.
Okay, so Shari, I know that for me as a reader personally, I don't give a shit about a pronunciation guide because I'm going to make
Yeah.
up my own pronunciation
Absolutely.
for it anyway. But I'm also seeing a lot of readers are demanding it. What's your take on that?
I will read them when they're there. And I often laugh at myself because I usually don't read it right away or I forget it. I'll be honest. Like I'll read it through and then I'm reading the book and I forget how the author said to pronounce it. And I start just pronouncing it how I want to anyway. And then maybe later I'll go back and I'll look at it and say, oh, okay, I'm doing it wrong, but I'm going to stay with it because now I'm used to it. um, so I would say they're not a big deal to me. I won't be likely to include one at any point in this series because I feel like my names are not as exotic or difficult or made. I don't know. My names are just a little more straightforward. I guess they're easier. And if anyone mispronounces, it's not a big deal. I don't mind how people want to read my characters' names. It's totally fine. I feel like I like leaving a lot up to reader interpretation on how they want to perceive things is fine with me.
I recently had a guest on. Now, to prove my point, so she's
Yeah.
pure fantasy. She's got a little bit of an interesting name for her book, but like I had said it in my head like 5 times. I was like, cool,
Yeah.
I'm going in, I've done my research, I know what her book sounds like. Say her book name, and she corrects me, and I'm like, and then I couldn't say it. And then I
Yeah.
tried to mention her series name, and again, I was convinced I had it. She was like, no. And I was like,
No,
I
got
speak
it.
English. I was like, I promise you, English is my first language.
I'm not butchering it on purpose.
Now, I do ask every guest this question, and I'm going to ask it to you as well.
Okay.
What's your bookish hot?
So I would say I feel that a lot of romantic fantasy books I read, even though I still do love a lot of them, I often find that too many times characters get out of every bad situation that they're in. I think, and then by the time you get to like a third book in a series and something is happening, you think, well, they're going to be fine because they're always fine. Nothing bad is actually going to happen. They get out of everything. So there's no high stakes and it takes away from the emotions that you feel in a story. Yeah, that's not me saying, go kill all your characters or have these horrible things happen to them. But I just think, keeping it based in reality and sometimes they're not going to escape every single moment that faces them that could be potentially dangerous to them.
Correct me if I'm wrong, trying to is that there needs to be consequences. That's actually what I enjoyed so much about the Ascended recently. For the final book in my trilogy, I need to kill off a character, and let me tell you, I angry messaged my editor, and I was like, I'm not like a super emotional person, but I was like,
Yeah.
I am quite distraught about this
Yeah.
because this character has fought through so much to get to like this happy place, and now
Yes.
I'm gonna come in and kill him off.
Yes.
And she goes, as a reader, I'm mad at you, but she's like, as your editor, I have to tell you that's great reading material. And I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I'm gonna have to do.
Exactly.
And then in another whip that I've got, again, it was a character I never planned for. and I needed to kill the character off as well. Because again, it's where the story took me.
It's where, yeah, where it needs to go.
And like I messaged her, I was like, Kate, I don't want to. I'm stamping my feet, like I'm throwing a tantrum. And she's like, yeah, it would be like your readers wouldn't really trust you if you didn't go that route because it's like the logical conclusion in the story.
Yes.
And it's a great character motivation as well. So like it makes a lot make sense. And I was like, damn. And my number one rule as an author is if someone is dead, they stay dead.
They're dead.
There,
Yeah.
there has to be some kind of consequences to
There
magic.
does. Exactly. Exactly. That's the thing. And that's where I was like, this would be like the bookish hot take I could go with because I feel like it happens too much. And possibly more in some of the traditionally published books because again, I think they think about marketing and we don't want to piss off your readers if we kill this main character. Let's keep it, like the Twilight ending where all the carnage was actually just
Yeah.
a vision and nothing bad actually happens. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think there has to be consequences for your characters. And when I was writing Masked, and without giving too much away, but faced with a moment where Adeline ends up in a certain situation, the reality was if this were real life, there would be no getting out of this. This person is not just going to let her go home now. This is not reality. So this is where it has to go. And this is the only way to make it feel authentic. And so I did. In the second book, I did kill off a character that I won't say too much, but I cried when I killed off the character. And there will be more carnage in the third book for sure. I do think sometimes on the flip side, I have issues when a character is killed off or something just for shock value and it actually doesn't make sense for the story. So I think it just all comes down to realistic consequences for your characters, realistic for your story. Don't do things just for shock value. Make it feel authentic because it's what fits the story you're telling.
When you're deciding, hey, you have this book idea, okay, whether
Mhm.
standalone series, I know my answer, but I want to hear from you. How do
Mhm.
you decide, hey, this book is good enough to actually invest the time and the money to turn it into something to publish?
I would say if I stay with it. Mostly. I feel like I've started projects and they just don't have what it takes to keep going. Either the story's not really there or it's not the right time for me as a writer to write this story. So it sits. I have a whole little graveyard, I call it, on my computer of stories I've kind of started and then left off. And there have been, I did take one and I put it into, I'm writing this novella. It's definitely more of a horror gothic romance, very villain centered. I love it. I'm having a lot of fun with it. And I had a piece to a different story that I had started that just didn't feel like it fit with anything. But now as I'm writing this one, I thought, hey, that would actually fit very well. And so I was able to rework it and make it fit this story. I think if I'm passionate about it and I see it through and and I'm happy with it and it's a story that I would want to read because ultimately that's what I feel like I write. I write stories that I would want to read. And if I feel that way about it throughout the writing process to where I get to the finish line, then I'm going to most likely see it through because then I feel like there's going to at least be someone out there who's going to feel like this book is also for them.
That really speaks to me about the whole, is it something I want to read? I know we all like to pretend that we're special little snowflakes, but like I'm writing the books that I
Yeah.
want to read. My whole pitch for my Supernatural Mafia series is
I love it.
I was watching an episode of Supernatural, the TV
I
show.
love it.
Season 9,
Mhm.
Bloodlines. That was
Mhm.
the first like drop. Because I was
Yeah.
like, why is this not picked up for a backdoor pilot? Like it was phenomenal. Okay. And then the Stein family kind of like subplots. I was like, you gave me 2 episodes. What
Yeah.
the fuck?
We need more.
Okay.
Mhm.
Exactly. And
Mhm.
that is literally how my Supernatural Mafia like series was
That
born.
sounds amazing, by the way. Like I already want to. That's all you had to say, and I'm like, okay, I'm reading this.
And then I was like, take Gossip Girl, the Gossip Girl setting, but it was like Vampire Diaries type laws. Bam, we have
Yeah.
a series. I am literally writing the book that I want to read
Yes.
because Supernatural did me dirty and they did not like complete that arc.
Hmm.
And I'm like, that is a big part of how authors actually write. And I agree with you on the passion thing because I'm actually sitting on a new book idea right now where it has legs. It
Hmm.
does. But
Yeah.
I'm like, question mark, question mark. Do you know what I mean? So I'm like, just
Exactly.
sitting on it
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
I'm seeing where it goes,
Hmm.
but also not forcing it because not every idea has to see the light of day.
Exactly. And maybe down the road it will find its place and maybe it won't.
I am seeing a growing trend, at least in the Bookstagram community, and I actually don't know how I feel about this. And I'm usually a very decisive person. So when I tell
Hmm.
you I don't know, like that is
Yeah,
a big thing.
that's true.
Authors are starting to include recaps in their subsequent books.
Hmm.
So, for example, you're writing a trilogy, you've released book one, you release book two a year later, you do a recap of what's happened in book one, and then the same in book three. Now, some readers are calling it lazy, which I find a bit cruel if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Some people are saying, oh, they don't want that because they actually want to do a reread of the series as the books are
Hmm.
released, because they find it fun. I'm seeing some readers praise it as a very necessary step in the writing process.
Yes.
What do you think about this?
My brain goes to the Mortal Instruments. And the reason it does is because though I loved rereading every single book well, let's be real, there was 7 books. I started reading the Mortal Instruments when book 1 came out. And so I was there with it, and before book 2 came out, I had to reread. I reread book 1, and then before book 3 came out, I reread 1 and 2, and so on. And then the Infernal Devices came out, and the Infernal Devices is my absolute favorite book series of all time. There was a lot of rereading going on, and though it took a lot of time, and I would be honest, at this point in my life, I don't have time to reread books anymore. Before when the next one comes out, it's harder for me to do. I often will just try to reread the most recent one or the last few chapters. Where I'm going with this is, would a recap have been nice to have? I don't know. Maybe, but I think I still would have rather. The recap doesn't give me the emotions. When I leave a world for a while, it's inevitable that you somewhat disconnect with the characters because you're spending your time with new characters and these other ones you haven't spent time with in 2 years. I like to be emotionally invested in a story. I can see where the appeal would be for some readers, that they want a recap because maybe they feel like, I definitely don't have the time to go back through it all. I don't remember what happened. It's difficult as an author to give that little, here's where we're at, authentically. So that's something that I don't try to do too much. It's just kind of, here's where we are. Let's jump back into it. I guess I'm like you. I don't have a set opinion on it. I can see where some people would want it. It probably wouldn't be something I would read. I'd rather just reread the book. Maybe if it's put on an author website or something instead of at the front of a book, and it's like, if you want the recap, just, you gonna say hi? This is not the yapper, but this is my emotional
Okay.
support doggy.
Well, she is my sunshine, my reason for being, my emotional support woofy. Yes.
Doggies are the best.
Yeah. So she's made far more appearances on the podcast than I don't know
But I
what.
bet people love that too, though.
Yeah, and she also has a human eyes, and she just happens to be so cute, and she's still a puppy, even though she's
She's
getting very.
beautiful.
Yeah, it was quite an interesting story.
Oh my god, she's
Look
so
at that
cute.
flute! Look at that flute! Excuse me. Can you just? Okay, okay. Oh, you are so lovable today. Yes. Oh, you are so lovable.
There's
Okay.
just nobody.
Okay. So you just don't want me to have this podcast episode anymore.
She's like, we're done. I want to just snuggle now.
Okay, but
I've given time. They will.
I do want to ask, what is a fantasy book that you want to see get a little bit more love from the Bookstagram community?
So I would say that there's two. One is a traditionally published book that I just think is one of the most beautiful books I've ever read. The other one, and it's known, but I just think when you think about in this spectrum of all of the fantasy books that get love out there, it only got a small, small, small piece. For the traditionally published one, it would be Strange the Dreamer series by Laini Taylor.
Okay.
It is just unbelievably beautiful. The story is incredible. It is so unique. The ties it has to other mythology is so well done. The characters are incredible. The writing is gorgeous. I mean, I could go on and on. So that one, hands down, I just think, you just don't see it many places. And as you said, you'd never heard, I mean, many people haven't even heard of it. For the indie one, I would definitely want to shout out Shadow Voyager by Sharon Garrison. She just released her second book yesterday. It has definitely the dark elements that are so much fun. It's really incredibly well written. And yeah, I just think that that's one that I would love to see get more hype and more love. The
Another one.
people who have read it I have loved it, but you just, you want to see it take off more.
What's
That's the hardest part, is the word of mouth in this industry, and getting people to hear about your book, then decide they want to even add it to their TBR, and then take it from their TBR into their actual shopping cart. It's this whole, you have to win them over several times. So it's tough.
I was chatting to one author, and I had her on the podcast recently, where in order to realize our dreams as authors, we actually have to become content creators as well to do those
Yes.
things you explained.
Absolutely.
So, off the back of that, I do want to ask, what does success look like to you in this industry? I know, what a load
Honestly, I mean, success for me would be getting my book out there into readers' hands enough where I could take that retirement option in 3 years and actually just focus on my writing. That would be amazing. But I think there's a lot of varying degrees of success. I wouldn't feel successful if I was making enough to do that, but yet my books were just falling short of readers' hopes or expectations, or it wasn't leaving them feeling something. Then I wouldn't feel successful, regardless of the amount it was making. So for me, it's twofold. It would definitely be enough to just make a living off of. Like I said, it doesn't need to support huge financial goals, just enough to sustain, and also meeting my own expectations and growing as a writer so that I can say this book is better than the last. If I don't feel that way about my, next book, then I don't feel like that's a success, because I should always be improving. I want the readers that have stuck with me to continue to, like you said, that auto buy. They gave me a chance. They chose my story over all the other stories out there in that moment. I know not every book's going to be for every reader, but I hope they find at least something they can connect with and feel. And if they decide to stick with me because they do enjoy my stories, then I want to keep offering them that.
My one friend, and shout out Carla, because I know you listen to this podcast. In the beginning with my debut, she's one of those honest friends. She's not gonna lie to
You need those. Yeah.
you. It is. And she started reading each of my books. And as I have finished a book, she gets it before my art team does, basically. Like,
I have those too. Yeah.
and,
They're important.
yeah. And I always give her print copies of the books. I refuse to have to pay for anything, just because she goes out of her way to write genuine reviews. And we have a joke where she's usually always reading one of my books on a plane. And I'm pretty good with plot twists, if I may say so myself. And she's always gossiping on the plane. And with every book, she tells me, I can see how much you've improved as a writer and storyteller. And for me, that is a real progress marker for me, because I know she'll tell me, like, hey, you need to go have a look at that because that was shit. If any of the listeners are vibing with you and they're like, hey, I want to connect with you, what is the best way to do that?
Instagram.
Instagram.
I
Okay.
am absolute shit about checking my author website. Like, I am horrible. It's there. I update it like once a year. My website is not reliable. It's don't. I like my website. I do like what it looks like and what I've done with it. But if you want up-to-date information, it is definitely my Instagram page. And I'm more than happy to respond to messages on there. That is the absolute best way to reach out to me.
Wants to support you, what is the best way to do that?
My books are available on Amazon, or they can contact me, and I sell author copies. We actually just moved on August 9th, so I have a home office here that still has a million boxes in it. But once everything is put away, I will be selling book boxes also. In the meantime, yeah, I'm excited. But in the meantime, I do have author copies that I can ship and sell. But Amazon has them, Barnes and Noble online has them. So any of those routes would be good. I'm working on doing an Etsy storefront down the road once I have the boxes where people can order too.
All very exciting.
Yeah.
Shari, I have to say, thank you so much for your time today. It has been an absolute ball of a time speaking to you. I've loved just getting to understand your process, what you're working on, and all these exciting projects that you're telling us about. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. It was so much fun. And I'm so excited to read your books. I mean,
Yeah,
everything you're saying, you've had all these little hooks that I'm like, oh my gosh, this is right up my alley.
the whole point of doing this has not been to promote me as an author. I've gotten so frustrated seeing the same authors being recommended over and over again. And it's not bashing anyone. It's
No,
just
it's
what I
not.
was just saying is
It's just
that
reality.
exactly. And I
Hmm.
mean, my episode that I released this week, this past Thursday, one of my loyal listeners was like, "Oh my god, I have been wanting a fantasy based more on female friendships than the romance thing." She's like, "I'm buying this next week." I was like, "That's why I do it." When another one of my loyal listeners went and bought another guest's book because they're like, "Hell yes," I'm like, "This is why I do it because the algorithm. We're all trying to beat the algorithm.
Hmm.
And if we can throw as many mediums out there as possible."
Absolutely.
To try and beat it. I really feel passionately about helping others succeed because it is not a fucking competition.
No,
There
it's
is
not.
enough
There's
space.
room for all of us.
Okay, and I mean,
Hmm.
a lot of these books on my shelves are written by my friends. Okay, and it's not just any book. It's a book I've read. It's a book I've loved. It's a book
Hmm.
that I feel passionately about, and I will recommend them on my author page
Yes.
to anyone that wants it.
Yeah. So I love how much the atmosphere has changed for indie authors. There's so much more acceptance. People are not looking down on indie the way that they did when I first started. When I first published, it was like, oh, you're indie, it's because you weren't good enough. And
Common.
that was it was so hurtful and it was so hard to overcome. And so now indie is having its moment, and I love that. And I hope we stay in this realm where indie gets that respect. But finding creators who promote indie as well as traditional or however they do it, but that just look at books as books, and we want to promote books and books that readers will love. And that is still somewhat hard to find. And so pages like yours are just so beyond appreciated. And I'm just beyond grateful that we found each other and I was able to be on here and talk to you and get to know you.